The carriage door opened to darkness and rain, and Carenza Whitmore was shoved out before she could brace herself. Her knees struck wet gravel with bruising force, her palms scraping against stone, as she caught herself from falling face first into the mud. The cold seeped through her thin muslin dress instantly. Behind her, she heard the carriage door slam shut, heard her stepmother's voice call to the driver. "Go. Quickly now." "Wait." Carenza scrambled to her feet. "Margot, please, you cannot leave me here." But the carriage was already moving, wheels churning through mud. Through the rain-streaked window, she caught one final glimpse of her stepmother's face, pale and beautiful and utterly devoid of remorse. Beside her sat Odette, her stepsister, who had the decency to look away. Then they were gone, swallowed by the storm and the night, leaving Carenza alone on the steps of Blackmere Hall. She turned slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs, and looked up at the house that would become her prison. It rose from the moorland like something carved from nightmare, all sharp angles and black stone, windows dark save for a single light burning in the highest tower. No footman appeared, no housekeeper emerged. There was only rain, wind, and massive oak doors before her like the gates of the underworld. Carenza's hands shook as she climbed the remaining steps. She was 19 years old. 3 hours ago, she had been reading poetry by candlelight. She had not known her stepmother had packed her trunk, had not known that the debt her father owed before his death had come due, had not known that the price was her. "You should feel honored," Margot had said, her voice cold as January frost. "The Duke of Blackmere requires a bride. The contract demands the eldest Whitmore daughter. That is you. You should be grateful I am giving you this opportunity." Grateful, to be traded like livestock, to be given to a man known throughout the county as the Reclusive of Blackmere, a duke who had not been seen in society for 7 years, whose servants spoke of him in whispers, whose name made even hardened men cross themselves. The doors opened before she could knock. A woman stood in the entrance hall, tall and severe, dressed in unrelieved black. Her silver hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin of her face, and her eyes, pale gray and sharp as broken glass, swept over Carenza with clinical assessment. "You are late," the woman said. "His Grace expected you an hour ago." The roads were flooded. "Excuses." The woman stepped aside, gesturing curtly. "I am Mrs. Creed, the housekeeper. You will speak only when spoken to. You will not wander after dark. You will not enter the East Wing. Is that clear?" Carenza's chin lifted despite her fear, despite the cold water dripping from her hair into her eyes. "I was not informed there would be rules." "There are always rules, girl. You simply have not learned them yet." Mrs. Creed's lips thinned into something that might have been a smile on a warmer face. "Leave your trunk there. Someone will collect it. Follow me." The entrance hall was cavernous, lit by candles struggling against the darkness. Portraits lined the walls, generations of Ashford ancestors, with stark features and watchful eyes. They climbed staircases, turned down corridors, until Carenza lost all sense of direction. The carpets were worn, the wallpaper peeled. Whatever wealth this family once possessed had been spent elsewhere. Finally, Mrs. Creed stopped before a door of carved mahogany, its surface etched with ravens in flight. She knocked twice, sharply. "Enter!" The voice from within was low, rough, like gravel dragged across stone. Mrs. Creed opened the door and stepped aside. "Miss Whitmore," she announced, as requested. Then she was gone, her footsteps retreating down the corridor, leaving Carenza alone on the threshold of a room she could not see into, facing a voice that belonged to a man she had been given to without her consent. "Are you going to stand there all night?" The voice again, tinged now with something that might have been amusement or irritation? Or do you require a written invitation? Carenza stepped through the doorway. The room was a study, lined floor to ceiling with books, a fire roaring in the hearth, despite the warmth of the summer storm. Heavy curtains blocked the windows, and there, seated behind a massive desk with his back to the flames, sat the Duke of Blackmere. She had expected a monster. The village rumors had prepared her for scars, for deformity, for some physical horror that explained his isolation. What she found was worse. Kaylin Ashford was beautiful. Dark hair swept back from a face of angular perfection, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could have been carved from marble. But his eyes, when they met hers, were the color of a frozen lake in winter, and just as cold, just as empty. He studied her the way a collector might study an insect pinned beneath glass. "You're smaller than I expected," he said finally, "and wetter. Did Margot throw you from the carriage into a ditch?" "Almost." Carenza's voice came out steadier than she felt. "She threw me onto your doorstep in the rain instead." Something flickered in those frozen depths. "Charming woman. Your stepmother. I can see why your father married her." He rose from his chair, and Carenza's breath caught. He was tall, well over 6 feet, and he moved with the controlled grace of a predator. "I suppose you want to know why you're here. I know why I'm here, to pay my father's debt. Do you?" He circled the desk, coming closer, close enough that she could smell wood smoke and something darker, something almost like grief. "And what exactly do you think that payment entails?" Before she could answer, a door slammed somewhere deep in the house, and a voice, high and hysterical, echoed through the halls. The Duke's expression shuddered instantly, all trace of dark amusement vanishing. "That," he said quietly, "is a conversation we will finish later. Mrs. Creed will show you to your rooms." He strode past her toward the door. "Do not wander tonight, Miss Whitmore. Some debts are more complicated than gold." Then he was gone, leaving Carenza alone in the fire-lit study with the echo of that scream still ringing in her ears. What had her stepmother sent her into? Sleep did not come that night. Carenza lay in a bed far too large for her, in a room far too grand for a debtor's offering, and listened to the house breathe around her. Blackmere Hall creaked and groaned like a living thing, its bones settling in the darkness, its walls holding secrets she could not begin to fathom. The scream she had heard did not repeat, but the silence that followed was somehow worse. At dawn, pale light revealed her prison. The room was beautiful in a faded way, dusty rose wallpaper and furniture that had once been expensive. A wardrobe held 3 dresses that had been hung there while she slept, fabrics finer than anything she had ever owned. Someone had been in her room. The thought made her skin crawl. A knock at the door made her jump. "Miss." A young maid entered, round-faced and nervous, carrying a tray laden with tea and toast and a small pot of honey. "Mrs. Creed says you're to breakfast in your room this morning. His Grace is occupied." "Occupied with what?" The maid's eyes darted sideways. "I wouldn't know, miss. What is your name?" "Pippa, miss." "Pippa." Carenza sat up, drawing the blankets around her. "That scream last night. What was it?" The tray trembled in Pippa's hands. "I didn't hear any scream, miss." "I did. It sounded like a woman. Or a child. I wouldn't know about that." Pippa set the tray down so quickly tea sloshed over the rim of the cup. "Mrs. Creed says you're to rest today. Tomorrow His Grace will see you properly." She fled before Carenza could ask another question. The toast tasted like ash. The tea went cold while Carenza stared at the wall and tried to assemble the fragments of what she knew. Her father, Aldrich Whitmore, had been a merchant who borrowed to expand his trade routes, borrowed more to cover bad loans, borrowed still more until he drowned in debt. When he died 2 years ago, the debts passed to his estate, to Margot, and to his only daughter. Carenza had known they owed money. She had not known they owed it to a duke. The debt is substantial, Margot had explained while servants loaded her trunk. The duke offered an alternative, a bride for his household. Then send Odette. She is your daughter. Margot's smile had been thin. The contract requires the eldest daughter. That is you. Besides, Odette is too delicate, too valuable, too beloved. Carenza was none of those things. She was the stepdaughter, the leftover, the girl who had inherited her father's debts without inheriting his protection. And now she was here, in a house of shadows, promised to a man who looked at her like she was a problem to be solved. The hours crawled past. Carenza explored her room, found it locked from the outside, and pounded on the door until her fists ached. No one came. She paced. She watched the daylight fade. She listened for screams that did not return. When the door finally opened, it was Mrs. Creed who entered, carrying a single candle. His Grace will see you now. Carenza had changed into one of the fine dresses, a deep burgundy silk that fit her perfectly, though she had not provided her measurements to anyone. The implications of that disturbed her more than she wanted to admit. Mrs. Creed led her through the labyrinthine halls, up one staircase and down another, until Carenza had lost all sense of direction. Finally, they stopped before a door she recognized, the same carved mahogany, the same ravens in flight. "You have questions, Mrs." Creed said quietly, not looking at her. "Advice. Do not ask them all at once. His Grace does not respond well to interrogation." "And if I demand answers anyway?" Mrs. Creed's pale eyes met hers. "Then you will learn very quickly why they call him the Recluse." The door swung open before Carenza could respond, and she found herself face to face with Calen Ashford once more. He looked worse than he had the night before. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His cravat was missing entirely, his shirt collar open at the throat, his hair disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it for hours. But his gaze, when it fixed on her, was as sharp as ever. "Miss Whitmore, you survived the night. I confess I was not certain you would. Was there a reason I should not have?" "Several, but none that concern you at present." He gestured for her to enter, then closed the door behind her, shutting out Mrs. Creed and the rest of the world. "Sit. We have matters to discuss." She sat in the chair across from his desk, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. "Your stepmother," the Duke began, settling into his own seat, "is a remarkably talented liar. I assume she told you this arrangement was a simple matter of debt repayment. She said I was to manage your household. Did she?" His laugh was harsh, humorless, and you believed her. "I had no choice but to believe her. She put me in a carriage and delivered me to your door like a parcel." "That much is accurate." He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "But the nature of the debt is rather more specific than household management. Your father did not simply owe me money, Miss Whitmore. He owed me a daughter." The room seemed to contract around her. "I beg your pardon?" 20 years ago, your father made a bargain with mine, a trade agreement that required a guarantee of good faith. The guarantee was a promise that if either family failed to uphold their obligations, they would offer a daughter of marriageable age to the other family's son. His eyes never left her face. Your father failed, spectacularly, repeatedly. And now, here you are. Carenza's hands had gone cold. "You mean to marry me?" "I mean to fulfill the terms of a contract I did not write, but am bound to honor." He rose abruptly, moving to the window, his back to her. "My father believed in the old ways, agreements sealed in blood and promise. I find them archaic and distasteful. But I am also the last of my line, and the solicitors have made it clear. I marry a Whitmore daughter, or I forfeit Blackmere and everything in it. The contract specified the eldest daughter. It did. And you are the eldest. He turned, and something flickered across his features, something almost like pain. Your stepmother knows this. She sent you because the contract demanded it. But I suspect she has other plans. Plans that will become clear in time. Carenza stood slowly, her legs unsteady beneath her. What do you mean, other plans? I mean that Margot Whitmore does nothing without calculation. She sent you willingly, almost eagerly. That alone makes me suspicious. His voice softened, just slightly. But those are concerns for another day. For now, you are here, and we must both make the best of it. The scream from the night before echoed in Carenza's memory. Who screamed last night? She demanded. What are you hiding in this house? The Duke's expression shuddered completely. That, he said, is not part of our arrangement. You will be my wife in name. You will manage the household affairs. You will not ask questions about matters that do not concern you. He crossed to the door and opened it. Mrs. Creed will discuss the wedding arrangements with you tomorrow. Good night, Miss Whitmore. She was being dismissed, like a servant, like a possession. Carenza walked to the door, then stopped, turning to face him one final time. I did not choose to come here, she said quietly. I did not choose this debt, or this contract, or you. But if you think I will simply accept whatever crumbs of information you decide to offer, you have severely underestimated me. Something stirred in his glacial gaze. Surprise, perhaps, or interest. Good, he said softly. I was hoping you would say that. The door closed between them, and Carenza was left alone in the dark hallway, with more questions than answers, and the growing certainty that her stepmother had not simply abandoned her. She had sacrificed her to something far worse than a reclusive Duke. 3 days passed before Carenza saw the Duke again. 3 days of wandering the permitted halls of Blackmere, of taking meals alone in the morning room, of asking questions that servants refused to answer. Pippa brought her dresses and drew her baths and looked increasingly terrified whenever Carenza mentioned the East Wing or the mysterious scream. Mrs. Creed appeared each morning with a schedule of household duties that Carenza was apparently expected to learn before the wedding. The wedding, as if it were already decided, as if she had agreed. On the 4th morning, Carenza woke to find a summons slipped beneath her door, thick cream paper, black ink, a single sentence written in a hand as sharp and angular as the man himself. The library. 10 o'clock. Do not be late. She arrived at 9:45 because she refused to give him the satisfaction of catching her unprepared. The library was the most beautiful room in Blackmere. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, tall windows letting in daylight, comfortable chairs before an unlit fireplace. The room smelled of paper and lavender. The Duke was already there, standing by one of the windows with a book in his hands. He did not look up when she entered. You are early. You said not to be late. You did not specify I could not be early. His lips twitched. It was not quite a smile, but it was closer than anything she had seen from him before. Sit down, Miss Whitmore. We have terms to discuss. She sat, choosing the chair furthest from him, though the distance felt insufficient. He closed his book and turned to face her. In daylight, he looked younger than she had initially assumed. 28, perhaps. 30 at most. But there was a weariness in his features that belonged to a much older man, a heaviness that suggested years of burdens carried alone. The contract your father signed requires a marriage, he began, moving to the chair across from her. It does not specify the nature of that marriage. I propose we establish terms that satisfy the legal requirements while preserving whatever autonomy we can salvage from this situation." Carenza's eyes narrowed. "You want a marriage in name only. I want a practical arrangement between two people who did not choose each other. Affection is not required. Pretense is." He leaned back, crossing one ankle over the opposite knee. "You will be the Duchess of Blackmere in all public respects. You will manage the household, oversee the servants, handle the social correspondence that I have neglected for far too long. In exchange, you will have complete freedom within the estate, a generous personal allowance, and my word that I will make no demands upon you that you don't wish to fulfill." It was more than she had expected, far more than she had feared. "And privately?" she asked. "Privately, we will maintain separate chambers, separate lives. You are not my prisoner, Miss Whitmore, whatever your stepmother may have implied. Once the marriage is solemnized and the contract fulfilled, you may come and go as you please. I ask only that you maintain the appearance of a functioning marriage when we are observed." "Why?" The question burst from her before she could contain it. "Why do you need a wife at all, if you intend to ignore her existence? What is so precious about Blackmere that you would bind yourself to a stranger to keep it?" The Duke's expression flickered, then hardened. "That is not a question I intend to answer." "Then I have a question you must answer." Carenza leaned forward, holding his gaze despite the cold warning in his eyes. "Who screamed the night I arrived? Who lives in the East Wing? What are you hiding in this house?" Silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. "You ask too many questions. You offer too few answers. If I am to be your Duchess, even in name, I deserve to know what I am attaching my name to." He rose abruptly, pacing to the fireplace with his back to her. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. "Her name is Honoria. She is my sister. She is unwell, and she does not leave her rooms, and she is absolutely none of your concern." His sister. Carenza had not known he had a sister. Nothing in the village rumors had mentioned family of any kind. The Reclusive Blackmere, they called him. The last of the Ashford line, alone in his crumbling estate, with only servants and shadows for company. Unwell how? In a manner that requires privacy and specialized care. He turned, and for the first time, she saw something other than cold control in his expression, something that looked almost like fear. "Honoria has not been well since our parents died. She has episodes that frighten her and exhaust her, and leave her unable to recognize even her own brother. I keep her hidden, not out of shame, but out of protection. The world is not kind to women whose minds work differently than expected." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and unexpected. "I am sorry," Carenza said quietly. "I did not know." "No one knows. That is rather the point." He returned to his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "I tell you this because you will hear her, eventually, and I would rather you understand than imagine something worse. But I must have your word that you will speak of this to no one. If society learned that the Duke of Blackmere keeps a mad sister locked in his East Wing, the gossip alone would destroy what little remains of our family's reputation." "She is not mad," Carenza said sharply. "She is ill. There is a difference." Something thawed in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or gratitude. "Yes," he said slowly. "There is." The tension in the room eased, just slightly, though Carenza remained wary. One honest answer did not erase all her questions, but it was a beginning. "I have conditions of my own," she said. "If we are to negotiate, then negotiate we shall." The Duke inclined his head. "I'm listening. First, I want letters sent to my family. Not to Margot, she has made her feelings perfectly clear, but to my father's sister, my Aunt Bellamy, who lives in the north. She doesn't know what has happened to me. She deserves to be informed. Granted. Second, I want access to all parts of the house, not Honoria's private chambers. I understand the need for her peace, but I will not be confined to approved hallways like a well-behaved ghost. If I am to be mistress of this estate, I will know it fully. A pause. Then, reluctantly, granted, with the exception of Honoria's wing during her episodes. Third, Carenza held his gaze directly. When this marriage ends, however it ends, I want independence, not a return to Margot's household, not a quiet retirement to some distant property where I will be forgotten. I want funds sufficient to establish my own life, and connections sufficient to ensure I am not ruined by association with you. The Duke's expression was unreadable. You assume this marriage will end. All arrangements end, Your Grace. I simply wish to ensure I survive this one. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he extended his hand across the space between them. Your conditions are accepted, Miss Whitmore. Do we have an agreement? Carenza looked at his hand, elegant and steady, offered without hesitation. She thought of her stepmother's cold smile, of Odette's averted eyes, of the carriage disappearing into the rain. She thought of the scream in the darkness, and the sister she had not known existed, and the man before her, who was perhaps not the monster the village whispered about, but something far more complicated. She took his hand. We have an agreement. His grip was warm, firm, briefer than expected. He released her and stood in one fluid motion. The wedding will take place in 3 weeks. Mrs. Creed will handle the arrangements. I suggest you use the time to familiarize yourself with the household accounts. He moved toward the door, then paused. And Miss Whitmore? Yes? Whatever you may think of me, whatever rumors you have heard, I am not your enemy. His grip tightened on hers with unexpected intensity. Your stepmother is. Remember that. He left before she could respond, and Carenza sat alone in the library, surrounded by books and dust and the echo of his words. Her stepmother was her enemy. That much she had already known. What she had not expected was the possibility that the Duke of Blackmere might one day become her ally, or something more dangerous still. The weeks that followed were an education in contradictions. Blackmere Hall was crumbling and magnificent in equal measure. Carenza discovered rooms with furniture draped in white sheets, chandeliers thick with cobwebs. But she also found a conservatory where orchids bloomed, a music room with a pianoforte still in tune, a kitchen garden where herbs grew wild. The estate was dying, but it was dying beautifully. Mrs. Creed became her reluctant guide, walking her through account books and household inventories with the grim efficiency of a general surveying a losing battle. The numbers were worse than Carenza had imagined. Blackmere had been bleeding money for years, its income from tenant farms barely covering the costs of basic maintenance. The servants' wages were 3 months in arrears. The roof leaked in 17 places. The eastern tower, where Honoria lived, required constant repairs that consumed whatever surplus the estate managed to produce. His Grace's father believed in appearance over substance, Mrs. Creed explained one afternoon, her thin lips pressed together in disapproval. Grand parties, expensive horses, investments that never materialized. When he died, he left nothing but debts and obligations. And His Grace has been trying to repair the damage ever since. His Grace has been trying to keep this family from complete ruin. Mrs. Creed's pale eyes met hers. He has sold paintings, furniture, his mother's jewelry. He dismissed half the staff 5 years ago. He has not purchased new clothing for himself in 3 years. Everything he has goes to maintaining what remains and caring for Lady Honoria. The revelation altered something in Carence's understanding. She had assumed the Duke's reclusiveness was a choice, an aristocratic eccentricity. Now she understood it was a necessity. He could not afford to participate in society. He could not afford to be seen. "Why did he agree to marry, then?" Carence asked. "If money is so scarce, a wife is an additional expense. Because without a wife, he loses everything." Mrs. Creed closed the account book with a decisive snap. "The contract your father signed included a clause. If the Duke of Blackmere fails to marry a Whitmore daughter by his 30th birthday, the estate reverts to a distant cousin who has been circling like a vulture for years. Lord Pemberton, a man who would sell Blackmere for parts and turn Lady Honoria out into the street." Carence's blood ran cold. "When is His Grace's 30th birthday?" 6 weeks from today." 6 weeks. The wedding was in 3. That left almost no margin for error, no time for delay, no room for the marriage to fail. "You begin to understand, Mrs." Creed said quietly. "This is not a game, Miss Whitmore. This is survival." That evening, Carence wandered the permitted halls with new eyes. She noticed the careful repairs where wood had rotted, the strategic placement of furniture to hide water stains, the way candles were rationed so carefully that entire wings remained dark after sunset. She noticed, too, the small touches that suggested someone still cared. Fresh flowers in the entrance hall, polished brass on the door handles, clean windows in the rooms that were actually used. Someone was fighting to keep Blackmere alive, and that someone wasn't doing it alone. She found the Duke in the library again, bent over correspondence by candlelight, his face drawn with exhaustion. He did not look up when she entered. "Mrs. Creed told me about Lord Pemberton," she said without preamble. "She told me about the clause in the contract." His pen stilled. "Did she? Why did you not tell me yourself? That you needed this marriage to save your home, your sister, everything you have left?" Would it have changed your answer? Carence considered. "No, I had no choice regardless." "Then what difference does it make why I need you, only that I do?" He set down his pen and finally looked at her. The candlelight carved shadows beneath his cheekbones, softened the hard edges of his features. "I'm not accustomed to explaining myself, Miss Whitmore. It is a skill I have had little opportunity to practice." "Then practice now." She moved to the chair across from him, sitting without invitation. "If I am to help you save Blackmere, I need to understand what I am saving it from." For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then something in his posture relented, some wall lowering just slightly. "Pemberton is my father's nephew," he began slowly. "The son of a younger brother, who always resented being second. When my father died, Pemberton contested the will, claiming the estate should pass to him since I had no wife, no heir, no prospect of continuing the line. The courts ruled in my favor, but only on the condition that I marry by 30. A safeguard, they called it. A guarantee that Blackmere would not die with me. And Pemberton has been waiting ever since. Waiting. Watching. Spreading rumors about my sanity, my seclusion, my fitness to hold the title." His jaw tightened. The whispers in the village about the recluse of Blackmere, those did not arise organically. Pemberton has been cultivating them for years, preparing the ground for my failure. Carence thought of the fear she had seen in Pippa's eyes, the way villagers had crossed themselves when her carriage passed. Calculated cruelty, designed to isolate. "Then we will not fail," she said firmly. "We will marry, and you will keep your home, and Lord Pemberton can choke on his ambitions." The Duke stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was a rusty sound, as if he had forgotten how to produce it, but genuine. For one brief moment, the ice in his eyes thawed completely. "You are not what I expected, Miss Whitmore. Neither are you. She rose, straightening her skirts. I will see you at dinner, Your Grace. We have a wedding to plan, and a vulture to disappoint. She left him there, still almost smiling, and carried that image with her into the darkened hallway. Perhaps this arrangement would not be the prison she had feared. Perhaps it might become something else entirely. The screaming began again at midnight. Carenza jolted awake, her heart pounding, the sound echoing through the walls like something from a nightmare. It was not a single scream this time, but a series of them, rising and falling, interspersed with words she could not quite make out. She was out of bed before she could think, pulling on a wrapper, grabbing a candle from the bedside table. The corridor outside her room was dark and empty, but she could hear footsteps somewhere above her, urgent and quick. She followed the sound. The east wing was forbidden. She knew this. Mrs. Creed had made it abundantly clear. But the screams continued, and something in Carenza could not simply lie in bed and listen. The staircase to the east wing was hidden behind a door that looked like part of the wall, but Carenza had noticed it during her explorations, had filed it away for later investigation. Now she pushed through it and climbed, her candle casting flickering shadows on the narrow steps. At the top, she found a corridor carpeted in thick wool, doors reinforced with iron bars. One door stood open at the far end, light spilling out. Carenza approached slowly. Inside, she found a comfortable room with a large bed, writing desk, and bookshelves. And there, in the center, the Duke knelt beside a young woman crumpled on the floor, sobbing. Honoria. She was younger than Carenza had expected, perhaps 17 or 18, with the same dark hair as her brother, but features that were softer, more delicate. Her nightgown was twisted around her legs. Her hands gripped Kaelin's arms with desperate strength. "They're coming back," Honoria gasped between sobs. "I can hear them in the walls. They're always in the walls. Make them stop, Kaelin. Please make them stop." "There is nothing in the walls." His voice was gentler than Carenza had ever heard it, patient and calm despite the anguish in his sister's grip. "You are safe, Nori. I promise you are safe." "You always say that. But they come anyway. They always come." Carenza must have made a sound, because both siblings looked up at once. Honoria's eyes went wide with terror, a fresh scream building in her throat. Kaelin's expression flashed through surprise, anger, and something that resembled shame before settling into cold fury. "I told you," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "to stay out of the east wing. I heard screaming. I could not simply ignore it. You could, and you should have." He rose, placing himself between Carenza and his sister, shielding Honoria from view. "Leave. Now." But Honoria was peering around him, her sobs quieting, curiosity replacing fear. "Who is she? Kaelin, who is she? Is she one of them?" "No, Nori. She is no one. I am Carenza." She spoke directly to Honoria, ignoring the Duke's warning glare. "I am going to marry your brother. I did not mean to frighten you." Honoria blinked. "Marry? Kaelin is getting married? In 3 weeks. He did not tell me." Honoria's voice carried a note of hurt. "He never tells me anything important. He thinks I cannot understand." "That is not true," Kaelin said, his voice strained. "I was going to tell you tomorrow, when you were feeling better. I'm feeling better now." Honoria pushed past him, approaching Carenza with the cautious curiosity of a wild animal. Up close, she was lovely despite her pallor, her eyes a warmer shade of blue than her brother's, less guarded. "You are pretty. Are you kind? Kaelin needs someone kind. He pretends he does not, but he does." Carenza glanced at the Duke, who had closed his eyes as if in pain. "I try to be kind," she said carefully, "though I do not always succeed. That is honest. I like honest. Honoria reached out and touched Carence's wrapper, rubbing the fabric between her fingers. This is soft. Mrs. Creed only gives me rough things. She says soft things are impractical, but I like soft things. So do I. Honoria smiled, and for a moment, she looked entirely normal, entirely sane, just a young woman meeting her future sister-in-law for the first time. Then her expression flickered, her gaze sliding sideways toward the shadows in the corner. They are quieter now, she whispered. The things in the walls. They are quieter when there are more people. Perhaps you should visit me again. Honoria. Kaylin's voice was gentle but firm. It is time to sleep. Miss Whitmore will visit tomorrow when you are rested. Promise. Honoria looked at Carenza with sudden intensity. Promise you will come back. Carenza held her gaze without flinching. I promise. The Duke guided his sister back to bed, murmuring reassurances until her eyes closed and her breathing steadied. Only when she was truly asleep did he turn back to Carenza, gesturing sharply toward the door. In the corridor, he closed the door behind them and rounded on her. I gave you explicit instructions. You gave me rules without reasons. Now I have seen the reason for myself. Carenza refused to back down. She is not mad, Your Grace. She is frightened and lonely and possibly ill, but she is not mad. The physicians say otherwise. The physicians are not the ones living with her. You are. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. How long has she been like this? The fight seemed to drain out of him. Since our parents died. She was 11. She was in the carriage with them when it overturned. She was trapped beneath it for hours before anyone found her. Our mother died, holding her hand. Carenza's breath caught. Oh. She does not remember it. Not consciously. But something in her mind broke that day and never healed. The physicians call it hysteria, mania, a dozen other names that mean nothing. I call it grief that has no outlet. He leaned against the wall, suddenly looking as young and lost as his sister. She has good days, sometimes weeks of good days. Then something triggers an episode, and she is back in that carriage, trapped in the dark, listening to our mother die. And you have been caring for her, alone, all this time. There is no one else. His voice was hollow. Our relatives want nothing to do with her. Society would have her committed to an asylum where she would be chained and forgotten. I am all she has. Carenza thought of her own family, of her stepmother's cold calculations, of Odette's averted eyes. She thought of what it meant to be the one who stayed, the one who carried the burden, the one who refused to abandon someone the world had already written off. Not anymore, she said quietly. Now she has me, too. The Duke looked at her for a long moment, something changing in his expression that she could not quite name. You would do that? Take on this burden that is not yours? I promised her I would return. I do not break my promises. He said nothing, but when they parted ways at the staircase, his hand brushed hers in the darkness, brief and warm. It was not quite gratitude. It was the beginning of something else entirely. The days that followed were different. Kaylin began appearing in unexpected places. In the morning room at breakfast, in the conservatory, where she tended orchids, in the library each evening, where discussions expanded from accounts into conversations about literature and philosophy. He was still guarded, still prone to retreating behind walls of cold formality when questions cut too close. But the retreats came less frequently now, and the walls seemed thinner. You played the pianoforte, Carenza observed one evening, having discovered sheet music tucked into a desk drawer with his handwriting on the margins. Quite seriously, from the look of these annotations. Kaylin's jaw tightened, but he did not deflect. My mother taught me. I have not played since she died. That seems a waste. Many things seem wasteful in hindsight. He took the sheet music from her hands, but gently, almost reverently. She used to say music was the only language that needed no translation, that it could speak directly to the soul without passing through the mind. She sounds wise. She was. Wiser than my father, certainly. Wiser than me. He set the music aside, his expression distant. Honoria has her eyes, the same warmth, the same way of seeing past surfaces to what lies beneath. It is why I cannot bear to send her away. Every time I look at her, I see our mother. Carenza understood then why he guarded his sister so fiercely. Honoria was not merely his responsibility. She was his last connection to a world that had been stolen from him. "Perhaps you should play again," she said softly. "Not for anyone else. Just for yourself. For her." He looked at her with an expression she could not decipher. Perhaps. The wedding preparations continued with relentless efficiency. Mrs. Creed produced a gown from some hidden storage, cream silk that had belonged to the previous Duchess, let out and altered to fit Carenza's slighter frame. A local vicar was engaged. Flowers were ordered from the garden. The household staff, what remained of them, began cleaning rooms that had not been opened in years. Through it all, Carenza visited Honoria daily. At first the visits were brief. Honoria was suspicious, prone to sudden silences, to fits of trembling that had nothing to do with cold. But Carenza persisted, bringing books to read aloud, bringing embroidery to work on while they sat in comfortable quiet, bringing small treats from the kitchen that made Honoria's eyes light up like a child's. Slowly, trust grew. "Tell me about outside," Honoria asked one afternoon, curled in her window seat, watching clouds drift across the moor. "I cannot remember what it feels like, to be outside without walls." Carenza moved to sit beside her. "It feels like freedom. The wind on your face, the ground beneath your feet, the sky so vast above you that your problems seem small in comparison. I used to ride horses, before." Honoria's fingers traced patterns on the glass. "Mother taught me. She said I had a natural seat. Father said I was reckless." A ghost of a smile. I was reckless. I loved going fast, feeling the world blur around me. "Perhaps you will ride again someday." "Kalen will not allow it. He thinks I will fall. He thinks everything will hurt me. He loves you. Fear often looks like control when love is underneath." Honoria turned to look at her, something ancient and knowing in her young eyes. "You understand him. I can tell. No one has understood him in a very long time. I'm trying to. Keep trying." Honoria took her hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "He needs someone who will not give up. Everyone gives up eventually. Promise me you will not." It was the second promise Honoria had extracted from her. Carenza wondered how many more there would be before this was over. "I promise," she said, and meant it. That night, Carenza found a package outside her door. Inside was a book, Byron's collected works bound in soft green leather. A note tucked within read simply, "For your dramatic moods." See, she held it to her chest and smiled. The following evening, she sought him out in the library. He was standing by the window, watching the sunset paint the moor in shades of gold and amber, and he turned when she entered with something like hope in his expression. "You found the book." "I did. Thank you. Though I suspect you simply wanted an excuse to clean out your shelves." His lips twitched. "You have discovered my secret motivation. I am a ruthless curator. The most ruthless." She moved to stand beside him, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his arm. "Honoria asked me today if I would teach her to embroider. She said Mrs. Creed's stitches are too perfect, that they make her feel inadequate. And you agreed. Of course, my stitches are charmingly imperfect. I will make her feel like a master craftswoman in comparison." Kaylin laughed, soft and surprised, and the sound did something strange to Carence's heart. She had heard him laugh once before, but this was different. This was relaxed, unguarded, genuine. "You have changed things here," he said quietly, still looking out the window. "In barely 2 weeks, you have changed more than I managed in 7 years. I have simply asked questions and refused to accept silence as an answer. That is precisely what I mean." He turned to face her, and suddenly the space between them felt very small. I had forgotten what it was like to have someone insist on knowing me, to push past the walls I have built. I am not certain I deserve it, but I find I am grateful nonetheless. Carence's breath caught. "You speak as though you are some kind of monster. You are not. I have been told otherwise often enough. By Pemberton, by villagers who have never met you, by a society that fears what it does not understand." She stepped closer, close enough to touch. "I have met you, Kaylin. I have seen how you care for your sister, how you sacrifice everything to keep her safe. That is not monstrous. That is love." His eyes searched her face, looking for something she could not name. "You use my Christian name now. We are to be married in a week. It seemed time." "Carence!" Her name in his voice was a revelation, each syllable weighted with something that made her shiver. "I do not know what I expected when your stepmother's carriage arrived, but I did not expect you. Is that good or bad? I am still deciding." But he was smiling as he said it, a real smile, one that transformed his harsh features into something almost beautiful. "Ask me again after the wedding." She should step back. She should maintain propriety. They were alone, unchaperoned, standing far too close for any definition of proper behavior. Instead, she said, "And if I ask you now?" His hand rose, almost unconsciously, to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered at her temple, warm against her skin. "Now," he said softly, "I would say that you are the best thing that has happened to this house in 7 years. And that terrifies me more than anything Pemberton could do." Before she could respond, a bell rang somewhere in the depths of the house, sharp and insistent. Kaylin stepped back, the moment broken, his expression shuddering. "That is Honoria's bell. She needs me." He was gone before Carence could say another word, leaving her alone with the sunset and the echo of his touch on her skin. Something had changed between them, something that went beyond contracts and arrangements and practical negotiations, something that felt dangerously like the beginning of love. The morning of the wedding dawned gray and heavy with the promise of rain. Carence stood before the spotted mirror in her chambers, wearing the cream silk gown that had belonged to Kaylin's mother, and tried to remember how to breathe. The dress fit perfectly, altered by hands she had never seen, and the woman who looked back at her from the glass seemed like a stranger. Someone elegant, someone who belonged in a duke's household, someone who was about to bind herself to a man she had known for 3 weeks. "You look beautiful, miss." Pippa's voice trembled with emotion as she adjusted the small circlet of flowers in Carence's hair. "His Grace will not know what to say." "His Grace rarely knows what to say regardless." "That's true enough." Pippa smiled, then sobered. "Are you frightened, miss?" Carence considered the question honestly. "I was, when I first arrived, but now I think I am something else entirely." "What's that, miss?" "Hopeful." The word felt dangerous on her tongue, like speaking a wish aloud and risking its destruction. But it was true. Somewhere in the past 3 weeks, between library conversations and visits to Honoria and the brush of Kaylin's fingers against her temple, Hope had taken root. The ceremony was held in Blackmere's small chapel, a stone building adjacent to the main house that had been hastily cleaned and filled with flowers from the garden. Mrs. Creed stood as witness. Pippa wept quietly in the corner. The elderly vicar spoke the words with practiced efficiency, and Carenza repeated her vows in a voice that barely shook. When Kaelin slid the ring onto her finger, a simple gold band that had been his mother's, his hands were steady, but his eyes were not. She saw something in their depths that she had not expected, something that looked almost like wonder. "With this ring, I thee wed." His voice was low, meant only for her, and it wrapped around her like a promise. They signed the register. The vicar pronounced them man and wife. And just like that, Carenza Whitmore became the Duchess of Blackmere. The wedding breakfast was modest, held in the morning room with only the household staff in attendance. Honoria had wanted to come, had begged and pleaded, but Kaelin had gently refused. Too many people, too much stimulation, too great a risk of an episode. Instead, Carenza had promised to visit her immediately after, to show her the ring, to describe every detail of the ceremony. She was just rising to fulfill that promise when the front doors of Blackmere Hall crashed open. The sound echoed through the house like a thunderclap. Voices followed, loud and demanding, and then footsteps, heavy boots on marble floors. Kaelin was on his feet instantly, his expression hardening into something Carenza had not seen before, cold fury, barely contained. "Stay here," he commanded, and strode from the room. Carenza did not stay. She followed him to the entrance hall, where a scene of chaos was unfolding. 3 men stood inside the doors, rain dripping from their coats onto the polished floor. The one in front was tall and fair-haired, handsome in a way that seemed calculated, with a smile that did not reach his pale eyes. "Cousin," the word dripped with false warmth. "I heard there was to be a wedding. How devastated I was not to receive an invitation." "Pemberton." Kaelin's voice could have frozen fire. "You were not invited because you are not welcome." Such hostility. And here I thought family should celebrate together. Pemberton's gaze slid past Kaelin to where Carenza stood in the doorway. "Ah, the bride, I presume. How charming. Though I confess I expected someone more substantial. You will not speak to her." "I will speak to whomever I please. I am still a peer of the realm, cousin, whatever your delusions of authority." Pemberton stepped forward, his men flanking him like dogs awaiting command. "I came to offer my congratulations, of course, and to inform you that I have filed a formal challenge to this marriage with the courts." The air in the hall seemed to solidify. "On what grounds?" Carenza heard herself ask, her voice steadier than she felt. Pemberton's smile widened. "On the grounds that the bride is not who she claims to be. My sources indicate that Miss Carenza Whitmore is not, in fact, the eldest daughter of Aldrich Whitmore. That distinction belongs to another young woman entirely, a Miss Odette Beaumont, daughter of Aldrich's second wife by her first marriage, legally adopted into the Whitmore family before Carenza was even born." The ground seemed to give way beneath her feet. Carenza saw Kaelin's face go white, saw his hands clench into fists at his sides, saw the triumph blazing in Pemberton's pale eyes. "The contract specified the eldest daughter," Pemberton continued, savoring each word. "If your bride is not the eldest, then the contract is unfulfilled, the marriage is void, and Blackmere reverts to its rightful heir." He spread his hands in mock regret. "Me." "That is a lie," Carenza said, but even as she spoke, doubt crept in. Odette was older than her by 2 years. Margot had always treated her as the precious firstborn. Had there been an adoption? A legal arrangement Carenza had never known about? Had her stepmother planned this from the beginning? I suggest you take your challenge to the courts and let them decide, Kalen said, his voice like iron. Until then, you will leave my house. Our house, soon enough. But Pemberton retreated, still smiling, his men falling into step behind him. At the door, he paused. Enjoy your wedding night, cousin. It may be the last peace you know for quite some time. The doors closed behind him. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Carenza could not look at Kalen, could not bear to see the doubt that must be forming in his eyes, the suspicion that she had deceived him, that she was part of her stepmother's scheme. I did not know, she whispered. I swear to you, I did not know. I believe you. She looked up, startled. He stood rigid, his jaw clenched, but his eyes when they met hers held no accusation. Margot orchestrated this, he continued, his voice tight with controlled rage. She sent you knowing the marriage could be challenged. She wanted Pemberton to win. The question is why? Because she hates me. The truth spilled out, bitter and undeniable. She has always hated me. I reminded her that my father loved someone before her, that I existed before Odette. She wanted me gone, and she wanted you ruined, and she found a way to accomplish both. Kalen crossed the space between them in 3 strides and took her hands in his. Then we will prove her wrong, he said fiercely. We will find the documentation. We will challenge Pemberton's claims. We will fight this together. Together. The word wrapped around her heart like armor. And if we lose, his grip tightened, then we lose together. But I do not intend to lose. Somewhere above them, a bell rang, Honoria's bell, and behind it, faintly, the sound of screaming. The wedding day was far from over. They found Honoria in the grip of her worst episode yet. She had torn her room apart, overturned furniture, shattered a mirror with her bare hands. Blood streaked her palms and her nightgown, and she huddled in the corner, rocking back and forth, whispering words that made no sense. The curtains had been ripped from their rods. Glass crunched beneath their feet as they entered. He came to the window. The man with the pale eyes. Honoria's voice was raw, scraped hollow by screaming. He said he would take me away. He said Kalen could not stop him. He said he would put me in the dark place where no one comes back. Carenza's blood ran cold. Pemberton. He had been here before the wedding, or sent someone to Honoria's window, had deliberately triggered her episode, knowing exactly what it would do, knowing it would shatter whatever peace this household had managed to build. He cannot take you, Kalen said, kneeling before his sister, his voice steady despite the anguish in his eyes. I will never let him take you. Do you understand? Never. You cannot stop him. Honoria's fingers dug into her own arms, leaving red crescents in the skin. You could not stop the carriage. You could not save Mother. You cannot save me. No one can save me. Each word was a blade, and Carenza saw them land, saw Kalen flinch as if physically struck. This was his deepest wound, the guilt he carried for not being there when his parents died, for not protecting his sister from the trauma that had broken her. 7 years he had carried this weight, and Pemberton had found a way to weaponize it, and Pemberton knew it. Pemberton had used it, had twisted Honoria's fragile mind into a weapon against her own brother. Honoria. Carenza moved slowly, carefully, until she was kneeling beside Kalen on the glass-strewn floor. She ignored the sharp bite of shards through her wedding gown. Look at me. Do you remember what I promised you? Honoria's wild eyes focused, just slightly. Her rocking slowed. You promised to come back. I came back. And I promise you now, on my life, on everything I am, that man will not take you anywhere. Your brother and I will not allow it. We are family now, all 3 of us, and family protects each other. You are married now." Honoria's voice was small, childlike. "You are his wife. You cannot leave." "I do not want to leave. I want to stay and fight." "Will you let me fight for you?" Something shifted in Honoria's expression. The terror did not disappear, but it receded, making room for something else. Trust. Fragile and precious, like the first green shoots after a long winter. "You promise?" "I promise." Honoria reached out with her bloodied hands, and Carenza took them without hesitation, ignoring the sting, focusing only on the girl who needed her. Behind her, she heard Kaylin's sharp intake of breath, heard him rise and move to gather bandages and clean water. They stayed with Honoria until dawn, cleaning her wounds, calming her fears, singing lullabies that Kaylin remembered from their mother. Mrs. Creed brought warm milk and fresh blankets. Pippa swept up the broken glass, her eyes red from crying. The household moved around them like a well-practiced machine, everyone knowing their role, everyone understanding without being told that this was not the first such night, and would not be the last. When Honoria finally slept, her bandaged hands curled beneath her chin like a child's, Carenza and Kaylin retreated to the corridor, both exhausted beyond words. The dawn light crept through the narrow windows, pale and unforgiving. "He will pay for this," Kaylin said, his voice barely above a whisper but edged with murder. "I do not care what it costs. I do not care what I have to do. He will pay. First we must win. Then he can pay." Kaylin looked at her, truly looked at her, and she saw the walls behind his eyes crumbling. "You were magnificent with her. She responds to you in ways she has never responded to me. In 7 years, I have never been able to calm her so quickly. She loves you, but she also fears disappointing you. With me, there is nothing to disappoint. I am simply here. You are not simply anything." He stepped closer, and despite the exhaustion, despite the blood on her hands and the fear in her heart, Carenza felt warmth spread through her chest. "You are extraordinary, Carenza. I do not deserve you. I do not deserve any of this." "Then earn me." The words slipped out before she could stop them, bold and challenging, and entirely improper for a woman who had been married less than 12 hours. Kaylin's eyes darkened with something that was not anger. "Is that a challenge?" "It is a promise. The same kind I made to your sister." She held his gaze without flinching. "Fight with me. Win with me. And then we will see what we deserve." He moved so quickly she barely registered it, one hand cupping her face, the other sliding around her waist, pulling her close. His lips met hers with an intensity that stole her breath, nothing gentle about it, nothing restrained. This was hunger. This was need. This was everything they had been circling around for weeks, finally given voice. When they broke apart, both gasping, his forehead rested against hers. "I will fight," he said roughly. "I will win. And then, Carenza, I will spend the rest of my life earning you." It was not a declaration of love. Not quite. But it was close enough to make her heart soar. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal documents and frantic searches. Mrs. Creed produced old correspondence between Carenza's father and the previous Duke, letters that hinted at the original agreement, but provided no definitive proof. Kaylin sent messengers to London, to the records office, to anyone who might have documentation of the Whitmore family history. Carenza wrote to her Aunt Bellamy, begging for information, for proof, for anything that might confirm her status as eldest daughter. Through it all, Pemberton waited, smiling, confident, his challenge working its way through the courts with agonizing slowness. And then, on the 7th day, a letter arrived. It was from Margot. "My dear stepdaughter," it began, the false warmth dripping from every word. I understand you have been seeking proof of your birthright. How touching. Unfortunately, the documents you require are in my possession, and I have no intention of surrendering them. You see, I made certain arrangements with Lord Pemberton long before your father died. Arrangements that will benefit both Odette and myself quite handsomely once Blackmere falls into his hands. You were always meant to be a sacrifice, Carenza. I am simply ensuring the sacrifice serves its purpose. With warmest regards, your loving stepmother. Carenza read the letter 3 times before the words fully registered. Each reading felt like another knife slipping between her ribs. Then she walked calmly to the library, handed the letter to Kalen, and watched his face transform from confusion to fury to something cold and terrible. She has the documents, he said flatly. Without them, we cannot prove your status. Without proof, Pemberton wins. Then we must get them back. How? Storm her house? Demand she surrender them? Yes. Carenza met his eyes with fierce determination. That is exactly what we must do. The journey to Ashworth House took 2 days. 2 days of rain-soaked roads and cramped carriage rides and silences that stretched like wounds. The countryside passed in a blur of gray skies and green fields, punctuated by small villages where people stared at the ducal crest on the carriage doors with naked curiosity. Carenza watched it all through rain-streaked windows and tried to prepare herself for what lay ahead. Kylan had wanted to come alone, to shield Carenza from whatever confrontation awaited, but she had refused absolutely. This was her battle, her stepmother, her past. She would face it herself, whatever the cost. Ashworth House looked smaller than she remembered. The hedges were overgrown, the paint on the shutters peeling, the gardens wild with neglect. Weeds choked the flower beds that had once been her mother's pride. The gravel drive was rutted and unkempt. Margot had always cared more about appearances in society than appearances at home, and without Carenza there to manage the household, things had clearly deteriorated. Good. They arrived unannounced, which was deliberate. Carenza wanted to see her stepmother's face before she had time to compose it, before she could arrange her features into the mask of concerned matron she wore for public consumption. The butler who answered the door was new, unfamiliar, and clearly uncertain how to handle the sudden appearance of a duke's carriage in the drive. He stammered apologies and showed them to the parlor while he fetched his mistress, his hands trembling as he took their coats. Carenza stood in the room where she had spent 19 years of her life and felt nothing. No nostalgia, no grief, no longing for simpler times, only a cold, clear anger that burned like ice in her veins. The furniture was the same, the wallpaper was the same, but she was different now. She was no longer the unwanted stepdaughter, desperate for scraps of approval. She was the Duchess of Blackmere, and she had come for what was hers. Margot swept in 10 minutes later, immaculately dressed in dark blue silk, her smile already in place. Her hair was perfectly arranged. Her jewelry was tasteful and expensive. She looked exactly as she always had, beautiful and cold and completely in control. Odette trailed behind her, pale and silent, her eyes darting between Carenza and the floor. She wore a simple gray dress, and her hands twisted nervously in front of her. She looked, Carenza realized with a start, afraid. Carenza, darling. What an unexpected pleasure. Margot's voice was honey over poison. And you've brought your duke. How charming. Though I fear you've wasted a journey. I have nothing to discuss with either of you. You have documents, Kalen said flatly. Documents proving Carenza's status as Aldrich Whitmore's eldest daughter. You will surrender them. Will I? Margot's laugh was light, musical, completely devoid of warmth. I think not. Those documents are my insurance, Your Grace, my guarantee that this unfortunate marriage will be annulled and Blackmere will pass to its rightful owner. Pemberton is not its rightful owner. He will be. And when he is, Odette will be his duchess, and I will be secure in my position for the rest of my days. Margot's smile sharpened into something predatory. You see, Lord Pemberton and I have an understanding. He wants Blackmere. I want security for my daughter. Together, we will both achieve our goals. It's really quite elegant, don't you think? Kerensa stepped forward. You sold me. You gave me to a man you believed would fail, knowing I would be ruined when the marriage collapsed. Your own stepdaughter. I gave you an opportunity. Margot's eyes were cold as chips of ice. A chance to live in luxury for a few weeks before reality intervened. Most stepdaughters in your position would be grateful. Grateful to be sacrificed. Grateful to be useful for once in your miserable life. The words landed like blows, but Kerensa refused to flinch. She had spent 19 years being diminished by this woman, 19 years of small cruelties and pointed silences, of being reminded in 1,000 ways that she was less than, unwanted, an inconvenience to be endured. She would not give her the satisfaction of one more victory. Mother, Odette's voice was barely audible. Perhaps we should simply give her the documents. She is married now. What does it matter? It matters because I said it matters. Margot rounded on her daughter with sudden viciousness. Do not presume to question me, Odette. You will do as you are told, as you have always done. Or have you forgotten what happens when you disobey? Odette shrank back, and Kerensa saw something she had never seen before. Fear. Real, bone-deep fear. Her stepsister was afraid of Margot, had perhaps always been afraid, hidden behind a facade of obedience and compliance. This is your last chance, Kalen said, his voice deadly quiet. Surrender the documents willingly, or I will take legal action. I will expose your arrangement with Pemberton. I will ensure every door in society closes to you permanently. Margot's smile did not waver. You have no proof of any arrangement. You have nothing but the desperate accusations of a ruined bride and her equally ruined husband. The courts will not listen. Society will not care. You have already lost your grace. You simply do not know it yet. She gestured toward the door. Now, leave my house before I have you removed. There was nothing else to say. Nothing else to do. They had come for answers and found only more questions, more obstacles, more walls between them and the truth they needed. They left. In the carriage, Kerensa sat in numb silence, watching the house disappear behind them. She had failed. They had failed. Pemberton would win, and Blackmere would fall, and Honoria would be cast out to whatever terrible fate awaited women like her. Asylum, chains, darkness, death. We will find another way, Kalen said, but his voice lacked conviction. There is no other way. The tears came then, hot and bitter, streaming down her face in rivers she could not stop. She has everything, every piece of evidence, every legal document. Without them, I am no one. I am nothing. I am exactly what she always said I was. You are not nothing. His arms came around her, pulling her against his chest, holding her as if she might shatter. You are my wife. You are Honoria's protector. You are the woman who walked into my house and demanded I be better than I was. You are everything, Kerensa. Everything. But everything was not enough. When they returned to Blackmere, exhausted and defeated, a messenger was waiting with news from the courts. The challenge had been accelerated. Pemberton had called in favors, greased palms, done whatever was necessary to speed the process. The final hearing would be held in 1 week. If Kerensa could not prove her status by then, the marriage would be annulled, and Blackmere would be lost. That night, Carenza made a decision. She waited until the house was silent, until Kaelin had retreated to his study with a bottle of whiskey and his grief, until Mrs. Creed had made her final rounds and retired. Then she packed a small bag, wrote a letter with trembling hands, and slipped out through the servants' entrance into the cold night. The letter said only this: "I will not let you lose everything because of me. I am going to find proof, whatever it takes. Do not follow me. Do not search for me. If I fail, at least you will be free to marry someone who can save Blackmere. Someone who deserves you. Someone whose past will not destroy your future. I am sorry. I love you. Carenza." By the time dawn broke over the moor, she was gone. She made it as far as the crossroads before the carriage caught up with her. Carenza heard the horses first, thundering through the early morning mist, their hooves striking the packed earth like drumbeats. She knew without looking who it would be. She had known, really, from the moment she wrote that letter. Kaelin Ashford was not a man who accepted defeat. He was certainly not a man who would let his wife vanish into the dawn without a fight. The carriage stopped beside her in a spray of mud and gravel. The door flew open before the wheels had fully stopped turning. And there he was, wild-eyed, disheveled, his coat unbuttoned, his cravat missing entirely, looking like he had not slept at all. "Get in the carriage, Carenza. I cannot. If I stay, you will lose everything. If you leave, I have already lost everything." He jumped down, his boots splashing in the mud, and caught her by the shoulders. His grip was almost painful, desperate, the hands of a man holding on to the only thing that mattered. Do you understand that? Do you truly not understand? I'm trying to save you. I do not want to be saved. I want you. His voice cracked on the last word, broke open to reveal something raw and bleeding underneath. I have spent 7 years protecting what I had left, holding on to ruins with my bare hands, telling myself that duty was enough, that survival was enough. Then you arrived, and you made me remember what it was to want something beyond survival. You made me remember what it was to live. Kaelin, I love you. The words came out ragged, desperate, nothing like the controlled Duke she had come to know. I love you, and I cannot lose you, and I do not care about Blackmere or Pemberton or any of it if it means watching you walk away. Let him have the house. Let him have the title. Let him have everything, if keeping it means losing you. Carenza's resolve crumbled like a dam breaking, all her careful arguments washing away in the flood. I love you too, she whispered, the words torn from some deep place she had not known existed. That is why I was leaving. I could not bear to be the reason you lost your home, your sister's sanctuary, everything your mother loved, everything you have sacrificed so much to protect. My mother would have adored you. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. His breath was warm against her skin, his hands gentle now where they cupped her face. She would have said that love is worth any cost, that choosing each other is the only choice that matters, that everything else, the houses, the titles, the expectations, all of it is just decoration. The love is what's real. And your sister? Honoria begged me to find you. The moment she heard you were gone, she came to my study in her nightgown, barefoot, trembling, but clear-eyed. She said if you left, she would never forgive either of us. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She also threatened to have an episode so spectacular it would be heard in London. I believe her. Despite everything, Carenza laughed. It came out wet, tangled with tears. But it was real. It was the first real thing she had felt since reading Margot's letter. Come home, Kaelin said softly. Come home, and we will face this together. Whatever happens, whatever we lose, at least we will lose it side by side. She looked at him, at this man who had been a stranger 3 weeks ago and was now somehow everything. She looked at the road stretching ahead, empty and cold and leading nowhere she wanted to go, nowhere that mattered. "Together," she said. He kissed her there, in the mud and the mist, with the horses stamping impatiently beside them and the dawn breaking golden over the moor. When he lifted her into the carriage, she went willingly, and when he climbed in after her and pulled her into his arms, she stayed there. They had 1 week left to save Blackmere. They would not waste a single moment of it. The answer came from the most unexpected source. 3 days before the hearing, a carriage arrived at Blackmere bearing Aunt Bellamy, Carence's father's sister, a woman she had not seen in nearly 5 years. Bellamy was tall and silver-haired, and possessed of a sharp tongue that had terrorized the Whitmore family for generations. She wore practical traveling clothes and no jewelry, and she swept into the entrance hall like a general arriving to take command of a failing campaign. She was also, as it turned out, in possession of every document Carence needed. "Your father sent them to me years ago," Bellamy explained, settling into the library with a cup of tea, and the air of a woman who had been waiting for this moment her entire life. He knew what Margot was, knew she would try something eventually. He made me promise to hold these papers until they were needed, until the day came when you would require proof of who you truly are. She produced a leather case, worn with age, but carefully preserved, the initials A.W. embossed in faded gold on the cover. Inside were birth certificates, baptismal records, legal documents attesting to Carence's status as Aldrich Whitmore's firstborn child, signed and witnessed and notarized beyond any possibility of dispute. And most damning of all, a letter in Margot's own hand, written to Lord Pemberton 3 years before Aldrich's death, outlining their entire scheme. She was never subtle, Bellamy said dryly, tapping the letter with one finger. Just confident that no one would ever find proof of her machinations. She thought she had destroyed all the evidence. She did not know Aldrich had made copies, or that he had entrusted them to me. Fortunately, I have spent decades collecting insurance against my brother's unfortunate choice of second wife. This is merely the most comprehensive collection. Kalen stared at the documents as if they were holy relics, his hands trembling slightly as he turned the pages. This is everything we need. It is more than you need. It is enough to destroy Margot socially, financially, and legally. Conspiracy. Fraud. Attempted theft of title. Deliberate mental cruelty to a vulnerable person. Bellamy smiled, and it was not a kind smile. I suggest we do all three. The hearing was held in a cramped courtroom in London, packed with spectators who had heard rumors of scandal and come to witness the destruction of a duke. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of curiosity seekers. The air was thick with anticipation and the smell of too many bodies in too small a space. Pemberton sat at the opposing table, his smile confident, his solicitor shuffling papers with practiced ease. He wore his finest clothes, his hair perfectly arranged, every inch the peer of the realm he believed himself to be. He did not know what was coming. Carence took the stand first. She answered questions about her birth, her childhood, her relationship with her father. She spoke clearly and calmly, her voice steady despite the hundreds of eyes upon her. She watched Pemberton's solicitor try to paint her as an impostor, a schemer, a woman who had deliberately deceived a duke to steal his fortune. Then Aunt Bellamy's documents were presented, the birth certificates with their official seals and careful signatures, the baptismal records, witnessed by the village priest and 3 upstanding citizens, the legal attestations, notarized and dated, and finally, read aloud in the hushed courtroom by the judge himself, Margot's letter to Pemberton, detailing every element of their conspiracy in her own elegant hand. The spectators gasped. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. The judge frowned deeply, his brow furrowed as he read the damning words. Pemberton's face went white as chalk, then red, then white again. White. "This is fabrication," he sputtered, half rising from his seat. "These documents are forged. This is a conspiracy against a peer of the realm. They are authenticated by no fewer than 6 independent sources," Kalen said coldly, rising from his seat with the authority of a man who knew he had won. "Including the parish records of Whitmore's home village, the office of the Royal Registry, and the personal correspondence of my own late father, who was present at Carence's christening and recorded the event in his journals." He produced another document, yellowed with age, but perfectly preserved. In his own hand, my father wrote, "Attended the christening of Aldrich's firstborn daughter, Carence, a healthy child with her mother's eyes. May she bring him the joy his first marriage lacked." The courtroom fell silent. Even the spectators held their breath. "Your Honor," Kalen continued, his voice ringing through the chamber, "I submit that Lord Pemberton's challenge is not merely unfounded, but actively fraudulent. He conspired with Margot Beaumont, now Margot Whitmore, to manufacture a false claim, deliberately targeting my wife and my estate for personal gain. I demand that the challenge be dismissed with prejudice, and that charges of conspiracy be brought against both parties." The judge studied the evidence for what felt like hours, though it could only have been minutes. He examined each document, compared signatures, consulted with his clerks. The courtroom waited in agonized silence. Then he looked up, his expression grave but satisfied. "The challenge is dismissed. The marriage of Kalen Ashford, Duke of Blackmere, to Carence Whitmore stands valid and legal. Furthermore, this court orders a full investigation into the conduct of Lord Pemberton and Mrs. Margot Whitmore, with criminal charges to follow as appropriate." Pemberton lurched to his feet, his face purple with rage. "This is outrageous. I am a peer of the realm. You cannot—" "I can, and I have," the judge said coldly. "Remove Lord Pemberton from my courtroom. He is to be held pending investigation." 2 bailiffs seized Pemberton's arms. He thrashed and shouted as they dragged him toward the door, his composed facade utterly shattered, his calculated charm replaced by the snarling fury of a cornered animal. "This is not over, Blackmere," he screamed. "You will regret this. I will see you ruined if it is the last thing I—" The door slammed shut, cutting off his threats. In the sudden silence, Carence turned to Kalen. He was already looking at her, his pale eyes warm for the first time since she had known him. All the ice melted away. "We won," she whispered. "We won." He took her hand, lifting it to his lips. "Together." The return to Blackmere was a triumph. Word had spread faster than their carriage could travel, carried by messenger and gossip and the inexorable machinery of society. By the time they reached the gates, the household staff lined the drive to welcome them home, standing in neat rows despite the cold wind, their faces bright with joy and relief. Pippa was weeping openly, clutching her apron to her face. Mrs. Creed stood at the door with what might, in better lighting, have been a smile, though she would deny it to her dying day. Even the ancient groundskeeper had emerged from wherever ancient groundskeepers lurked, waving his cap in celebration like a young man at a fair. But it was Honoria who mattered most. She waited in the entrance hall, trembling with excitement, her eyes bright and clear. She wore her best dress, the blue one that Carence had helped her alter, and she had arranged her hair herself. When Carence entered, Honoria flew to her, wrapping her arms around her with fierce strength. "You came back," she whispered. "You promised, and you came back." I will always come back. Carenza held her tightly, this girl who had become her sister. That is what family does. Honoria pulled away, her gaze moving between Carenza and Kaelin. You are truly staying? Forever? Forever, Kaelin confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. She is your sister now, Nori, in every way that matters. Honoria's smile could have lit the darkest corners of Blackmere. Then we should celebrate, properly, with cake and music and dancing. She grabbed Carenza's hand, tugging her toward the music room with the enthusiasm of a child on Christmas morning. Kaelin must play. He has not played in years, but he must now. It is a celebration. Carenza looked at Kaelin, remembering their conversation about the pianoforte, about his mother's lessons, about music being a language that spoke directly to the soul. Will you? She asked softly. He hesitated. The wounds were old, the memories painful. But then he looked at his sister's hopeful face, at his wife's gentle encouragement, and something in his expression eased. Yes, he said. I will. The music room had been closed for 7 years, dust covers protecting furniture that had not been touched since the old Duchess died. But the pianoforte, when unveiled, gleamed as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. Kaelin sat at the keys, his fingers hovering over the ivory. For a long moment, he did not move. The room held its breath. Then he began to play. The melody was soft at first, hesitant, the notes tentative like a bird learning to fly again. But as the music built, something unlocked in him. His fingers found their memory, found the rhythms and harmonies that had once been as natural as breathing, and the music poured out of him like water from a broken dam. Carenza watched tears stream down his face as he played, watched 7 years of grief and isolation pour out through the music. She watched Honoria sway beside her, eyes closed, lost in a peace she rarely found. This was what healing looked like. Not a single moment of transformation, but a gradual thawing, note by note, day by day, until what had been frozen could finally flow free. When the last chord faded into silence, no one spoke. The room held its breath. Then Honoria began to clap, and Carenza joined her, and even Mrs. Creed, standing in the doorway, brought her hands together in stiff but genuine applause. Kaelin rose from the pianoforte and crossed to Carenza, pulling her into his arms without caring who watched. Thank you, he murmured against her hair, for making me remember who I was before everything broke, for giving me back the music, for giving me back myself. You were always there, she whispered back. You just needed someone to remind you. That night, after Honoria had been settled and the household had retired, Carenza and Kaelin stood on the balcony outside their chambers, watching the moon rise over the moor. What happens now? Carenza asked. Now we rebuild. The estate, our lives, everything. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. It will take time. There is still much to repair. But we have time now. Yes, we have all the time in the world. She turned in his arms, facing him, memorizing the lines of his face in the moonlight. I never expected this. When my stepmother put me in that carriage, I thought my life was ending. Instead, it was just beginning. She meant to destroy you. Instead, she gave me everything I never knew I needed. His lips curved into a smile, real and warm. I should probably thank her, but I think I will have her arrested instead. Carenza laughed, and he caught the sound, with a kiss. 2 months later, Margot stood trial for conspiracy and fraud. She was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Her assets seized to pay restitution. Odette, freed from her mother's control for the first time in her life, sent a letter of apology that Carenza read 3 times before setting aside. Forgiveness would take time, but the door was open. Lord Pemberton fared even worse. His title was stripped, his estates forfeited, his name erased from every social register that mattered. He died 2 years later in a debtor's prison, unmourned and unmissed. Blackmere flourished under Carence's management. The roof was repaired, the staff properly paid, the gardens restored to their former glory. Honoria's episodes grew less frequent as she found purpose in helping tend the orchids, in learning to ride again, and slowly, carefully, rejoining the world beyond her tower. And on the anniversary of their wedding, Kaelin presented Carence with a gift. It was a portrait, commissioned in secret, showing the two of them seated in the library with Honoria between them. A family. Imperfect, unexpected, forged through trial and sacrifice, but real. Beneath the portrait, Kaelin had inscribed 3 words: worth every storm. Carence looked at the painting, then at her husband, then at the life she had built from the ashes of betrayal. Yes, she said softly, tears streaming down her face. Worth every single storm. And when their first daughter was born the following spring, they named her after both grandmothers, Honoria Bellamy Ashford, a bridge between past and future, between loss and hope. Because that was what love did, Carence had learned. It did not erase the storms. It made them worth surviving.